Hey, Stephen. Hey, everybody.
Hey
David.
everyone, welcome. Welcome to our weekly update here. Sorry, they're getting our bearings, getting everyone in the room here for the update. So we're gonna dive right in here and assume that you guys have been keeping along and that's what brought you here. I'll let David go ahead and David Johnston. Sorry, we've got two Davids here leading this one.
Cool. Yeah, no, it's been a fun week for PegNet. I mean, the Asian mining community seems very excited about PegNet. And so we've seen this fantastic increase past 500 million hash per second. It's pretty awesome to see. I mean, that's pretty critical to this whole model, right? Is that we have enough security on the mining side to make sure that the price oracles are set correctly. And so seeing this 100x increase from our original first Genesis block, I believe had 10 million hash in it. So, we've come a long way. I would say, mining is bootstrapped. We're off to the races. So it's been really cool to see that. That's been awesome for me. So I'll just start with highlighting that.
Yeah, this is incredible. I don't know what other projects are having this kind of traction right now. And all of it is community oriented. It's all based 100% organic. And with the mining community, we have our first live mining pool open and going, and people are even talking about mining on their old BlackBerry or Samsung, sorry, right? So I don't know if either of you want to touch on that. That's pretty exciting because they're getting wild fever too.
Chapman,
The pool that you're talking about, you want me to jump in there, David?
Yeah.
So the pool that you're talking about that went public is Orax, developed by Lucy Up Technologies. And I've been one of the beta testers since pretty much its kickoff and been very excited about the potential of it going public. And I'm pleased that it finally has.
Oh, we lost.
David, I think we lost your mic. And I think he's
back.
Oh, David. David, can you hear us? Okay.
I can hear you. Are we?
Your mic cut out for a little bit there.
Oh, did it? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Are we okay now?
10 seconds.
Yep.
Yeah.
So the pool, when it first went public, was at around 5 million hash. And I went to bed that night and it was at around 8 million or so. And I was really excited, thinking that was a great jump. And then I woke up the next morning and it was at something like 60 million. And now it's at 86 million. So people are realizing that this pool is extremely user-friendly. It's taking most people just a few minutes to get up and running, whereas setting up mining outside of this pool is a little bit of a hurdle. So Orax is definitely a very user-friendly system, and I'm looking forward to competing pools coming on and pushing each other in that direction of being even more user-friendly and further decentralizing PegNet.
Yeah, and if you're watching this and you want to get more information on any of these links or where to go, PegNet's kind of like town square is the Discord. So you could go to pegnet.org/chat, and that'll take you right to the Discord, and the community is super active at all hours of the day and time zones, and can get you what you need.
I find myself waking up a lot at 3 a.m. and be like, I need to check in, see what's going on in the Asian time zone, and just he's online. And all the people in Europe too. So I got to get to that Swiss time zone as fast as I can. Less 3 a.m. mornings.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. David Chapman, you want to touch on PegNet market cap?
Sure. So
Bring it up, actually, if you want me to share it on the screen.
Actually, I'll share it. I think that'll be a little bit more efficient.
Perfect.
So PegNetMarketCap.com is a website my company Factomize created, and it tracks the market cap of all the assets on for PegNet. Let's see if I can figure out how to actually share here. All right. All right, are y'all seeing that? Or am I doing a terrible job?
Looks good.
All right, so you're seeing, oh, for goodness sake. Okay, so are you seeing PegNetMarketCap.com right now?
Yes, yes, we are.
Okay.
Sorry, we were giving you a thumbs up there on the camera.
Okay, so PegNetMarketCap.com, just for those that might not be familiar, tracks all the assets that are on PegNet. And what we recently did, because of the new listing of Peg and pegged Factom on Vitex, the decentralized exchange, is we broke down the two different prices that you'll see for different assets, because when you're going to have a PegNet price, which is shown in this column, and you're going to have an exchange price shown at this column. And that allows you to see if there's arbitrage opportunities, how well the peg's working, etc. And we also, if you, oh goodness, if you actually click on it, you can see the price trend, for example, on the exchanges over the last 7 days and a month. We'll be listing all the exchanges as quickly as possible, and you'll be able to see the different listings at the bottom of this page. And then you can also go to the PegNet price column and see how it's been performing specifically on PegNet. And something we literally rolled out about 10 minutes ago was the total PegNet market cap. We used to just show over the last 30 days, but now that we've been live sufficiently long, we rolled out the all data so you can see PegNet market cap since its inception. So that will hopefully be useful to people as well. So hopefully we're going to be getting on more exchanges here in the not too distant future, and all these additional assets will start to fill in prices as well. All right, back to you. Let's see if I can undo my share here.
That's really exciting stuff there. I like being able to see the side-by-side comparison to what's going on in PegNet market cap, or the PegNet ecosystem versus the exchanges as well, for arbitrage opportunities and things like that is pretty cool. David Johnston, did you want to touch on the exchange listing activity and any updates there for the community?
Sure. So we saw both pegged to BTC and pegged factoids to BTC listings go live on Vitex. So it's VITEX. And a lot of the links are in Discord for people that want to check it out. But it looks like a decentralized exchange, and they sort of have a wrapper system where you can deposit assets from different protocols, and they create a Vite version of that in a smart contract. So if you see the smart contract version, it's peg/000. That's the smart contract for the wrapped peg. So there's, for people that want to negotiate it, there's a difference between the wallet and the exchange. Yeah, it seems like a cool little exchange, and I think this is a great place for the community to really experiment with listings. Listings are done by nodes in the Vite protocol. And so I think this will be sort of a proving ground for what gets traction. as more pairs get added and we see more trading, this can be interesting to see, does the Mexican peso, I don't know, take off, right? And there's some latent demand because there hasn't been a pegged stablecoin for the Mexican peso or the Philippine peso or the Brazilian real or any of these regional currencies that really haven't had a chance to have a stablecoin for. We don't know. There might be merchants and other people that find that really useful and come in to use it. So I sort of see us in this experimental phase the next few weeks as those listings go live, where people try out different listings, and I'm sure we'll see what gets the most traction. So, it's going to be interesting to see that go.
Yeah, for sure. We've got some chat going on for those who are watching this later from Belazar. We're going to make millions and the peso is going to pay for it.
We shall see. We shall see.
What else can we update the community on right now? We've got the hash rate growth. So we touched on it with the mining pool, but at large for within the PegNet ecosystem as well. And David, let me know if you want me to bring up the Factoshi.
Yeah, go ahead and bring up Factoshi.io/PegNet. And there's this really cool hockey stick graph going on. I see you've got it.
Yeah, give me 1 second here.
Yeah. So if you look over on hash rate, yeah, there you go. I think it's pretty much self-evident. Like it's gone from averaging 30 million hash to, I guess yesterday we crossed 500 million on a particular block, and the average, if you switch it to the 20 block average, SMA 20 there on the little options, yep, you'll sort of get a snapshot of where the average currently is. So if you put your cursor over yesterday, you'll see the average is even crossed 400 million. So yeah, that's a huge amount of growth, and again, that's super important for the security. And I see that we've got Paul online as well. He might have some other updates beyond hash rate, the first mining pool, and the first trading pairs that he wants to cover from the technical side, or maybe Stephen. But I know there's a ton of work being done. And there's actually just maybe they want to touch on the update to the APIs that was pushed yesterday. So I know a lot of people have been waiting on that.
Yeah, the APIs now support your ability to look at your transaction and your transaction history and a bunch of other queries on the PegNet that exchanges need and want. And but they're also have been integrated into the CLI, the command line version. So the developers can go and look at all this data as well through the APIs. Now, one of the things that I would like to point out, and Katie, if you could go back to Factoshi and click the network, share that. What we're seeing is, click the network tab. What we're seeing is more nodes showing up around the world. And so we didn't generally have a lot of nodes in China at all prior to the PegNet. Now we have 22 nodes in China. We have nodes in Brazil. If you go to South America, a couple of nodes there. We have a node in Mexico, and a few nodes in Canada. And of course, Australia and Japan, Russia, and elsewhere. We don't yet have any nodes. Well, now keep in mind, this is kind of a network perusal that we do through the APIs. So some countries could have nodes and we just don't see them because this is largely by IP addresses and to the extent that we can ping them. But what I expect to have happen as the news about CPU mining goes around and some more mining pools get set up, then we'll end up with some nodes showing up around the world. But this is a big uptick compared to where we were in August of 2019, just a few short months ago.
Sorry, where were we in August when we were getting started there? What?
I think we had one node in China. I think we had one or two nodes in Russia. We didn't have any in Ireland. Ireland is somewhere around 8, I believe. Yeah, right, or 20. And so we're expanding into some countries. We didn't have any in Mexico. We didn't have any in Brazil. So it's beginning to take off. I remember in the early days with Bitcoin, when I looked at a similar map, yeah, that's France. I remember a similar map of Bitcoin, and I was always looking for Bitcoin to finally spread into Africa, and it was kind of slow going. We're in my mind, it looks like we have a lot of acceleration here relative to what I've seen in the past with Bitcoin. So in any case, we still have a relatively low node count, but I believe that that's going to increase. But some of the data feeds that we're building may suppress literal network nodes, but we'll have more users. So we'll have to brainstorm how to reflect that in the adoption worldwide as it continues to accelerate.
Good stuff. Exciting stuff. We're getting a lot of good questions in the chat too. People curious. And for those who missed it, there's an update. I'll post it in the bottom of the link once we put this onto YouTube. We had an AMA, a Telegram AMA that David Johnston was fielding questions on for over an hour on Crypto Caliber chat. And there were so many great questions from that chat this week. And, you know, one of the community members, Dan Bainbridge and Publish OX, they compiled the questions and answers. So I'll share that around. Anyone from the technical side, which isn't me, want to field these questions that are going off in the chat, read them out. So if you're watching.
Well, some of the questions we kind of hit upon by accident, you know, things like the fact that, you know, NAT crawlers don't find all the nodes. And there was a suggestion by Pearly that maybe miners can self-report their location to Factoshi in some way to get, or to the PegNet so that we can get miner locations, you know, or at least, you know, by country. I mean, that's a really great idea. Maybe we can do that. Mixed Culture pointed out or asked whether the Harmony wallet will support PegNet assets. Yes, we're working on showing PegNet transactions inside of our Explorer. There's an enterprise wallet, and then there's Harmony APIs. They're not really the same thing, but being able to get a wallet that shows all the PegNet assets as well as Factom assets is on the table. Getting the Explorer to show all of those assets is on the table. All of this is developing in the next 30 or so days. 30.
So Paul, I'm going to interrupt you right
there.
Yeah. I clarified that by Harmony wallet, he meant the enterprise wallet.
Right.
And PegNet assets will assuredly not be integrated into the enterprise wallet. There are, as Paul alluded to, additional wallets being built, and we're hoping to have those released within 30 days. But the enterprise wallet itself will not have PegNet assets integrated into it.
That's right. At some point, we may create the ability to burn into the PegNet in the enterprise wallet, because that is a strictly Factom transaction. It looks like a burn. But that's probably the extent of what we would do to the enterprise wallet, and no one's working on that quite yet. We are looking for other ways to make it easier to move your factoids into the PegNet if you want access to the PegNet assets. And then I was just kind of talking around, not taking the question literally, but are we going to have a PegNet wallet? And definitely we have that being worked on. And will we have explorers to let you see what's going on in the PegNet? And we're definitely working on that.
Awesome. That stuff's a little over my head, to be honest. But so if someone else has a question or anything to add in there, forgive my ignorance and please stop me.
I have a different question for David and Paul. So PegNet by design, it creates oracles out of our proof of work miners. And having a decentralized oracle system is one of the holy grails out there for blockchain. You know, Chainlink has almost $1 billion market cap because they're viewed by many as being the leader in the industry. And one of the biggest problems with decentralized oracles is what they call the cost of corruption. Basically, if you can corrupt the oracles for very cheap and the value of the data that you are having, for example, a smart contract, or the value of the smart contract is really expensive, then it's not a trustworthy system. You need the cost of corruption to be more expensive than the value you would derive by corrupting whatever it is that you're securing or having a smart contract, etc. So my question to the two of you is, as we see the hash rate on PegNet increase, where obviously miners are putting a lot of capital into the system, is that increasing the cost of corruption for PegNet, or is that something different?
No, I think that's directly correlated to the cost of corruption. I think that's a great term. And if we think about it not just in a dollar term, but in terms of infrastructure and time and effort, so it's not just a dollar cost. If I had $1 billion and I wanted to corrupt a system, you can't necessarily if you don't have the infrastructure and all of the time and really expertise available to do it. And so I think one good measure is not just the dollar terms, but how many computers would you need to be able to access and install PegNet on and be able to coordinate to do this type of attack. And you know, depending on the presumed hash rate per computer, per miner, we're getting to a point where we're talking about 10 to 20,000 machines is the current equivalent hash rate of the PegNet, right? Depending on your presumption around the hash rate, you know, I know the Raspberry Pis will do 7 or 8,000 hash a second. I know the bigger computers will do 20,000 hash per second, but we're somewhere in that 10 or 20,000 machine range. And so that's partly why I'm so enthusiastic about this increase in hash rate, because, you know, I know the work that it took my mining team to put a couple of hundred machines on the network, and, you know, trying to you go through the cloud option, you build some, and you go through all these options. It's not trivial work to get that many machines onto the network. And so, you know, I think that's a good example. And so I'd love to have sort of a rolling total of, hey, we have now crossed 100,000 worth of machines, or 1 million worth, a hash power worth of machines. And I think that's a really good indicator, because, man, that would be an extraordinary effort, not only of capital, but of time and expertise to try to attack the network. And so this is the virtuous cycle we need to get going as people get more confidence. Okay, the cost to attack the network is now pretty high. I'm willing to put more assets onto the PegNet. I'm willing to burn more factoids in. I'm willing to hold more pegged gold or pegged factoids or pegged dollars, whatever their asset of choice is. And that in turn will increase the utility of PEG, right? And that gives more value into the hands of miners that are then willing to expend more resources, right? I remember the early days of Bitcoin when people were like, well, would you really trust a $100 million transaction on a network that's worth less than $100 million, right? There was a very similar challenge in bootstrapping Bitcoin, but eventually we got to that point. Yeah, people send billion-dollar transactions right? There are $20 billion a day that cross the Bitcoin rails, and people feel very comfortable about that because of how much infrastructure is now in place that secures the Bitcoin network.
Thanks, David.
You're welcome, Jeff.
So one of the things about being CPU mined is it makes it very hard to actually enclose all the architecture around reporting prices. It is true that mining pools limit how many parties collect the data that goes out onto the Oracle price record chain inside the PegNet, but it prevents them from owning it all the way up and down the vertical. So because any particular computer only hands you a little bit of hash power, it means that the more computers you get to contribute to your hash power, the better off you are, which means instead of trying to house big, expensive machines that blow a lot of electricity through hardware at a relatively efficient rate of power to hashing, you're more incentivized to bring in other people outside running regular computers all over the world that contribute to your hash power, and so you can have consistent rewards for these participants. But what that also means is those participants can jump to another pool if they decide you are corrupt. And so we're increasing the cost of corruption by increasing the exposure a mining pool has to the parties that are enabling it to perform adequately. And so in that respect, I believe we have a greater cost of corruption in our architecture than you do with typical mining. So and the other thing is too, with Chainlink, they are late into the game for oracles. We've been doing oracles on Factom for a long time, and most of the architectures around oracles don't realize the power of significant data being involved in your underlying technology. So we have a couple of advantages that in providing oracles that we really need to push as a protocol. And of course, this is on the Factom side rather than the PegNet side, but the PegNet is the first demonstration of this. I hope we answered the question adequately.
No,
that was good.
It's great. Do you feel like PegNet's proof of work mining that turns miners into oracles can be leveraged for other forms of data to help?
I do, and I think that what we want to do is create a peer-to-peer oracle layer that collects information from distributed miners that then records that data onto the Factom blockchain and uses something like CPU mined proof of work to demonstrate that there was many contributors to this data. And I think we have ways of building oracles on Factom that aren't easily implemented elsewhere.
So you talk about CPU mining quite a bit and the benefits of it. If someone were to create an ASIC for LXR hash, would you change LXR hash so that it would brick those ASICs? What's the thought process there?
Well, I suspect that because we're using a gigabyte buffer, they either create a, hundreds of megabytes worth of static RAM to cache that buffer, in which case their hardware cost is so high that it doesn't really benefit them over just adding more computers. So I think the way you break the LXR hash is you get better DRAM, but the second somebody improves DRAM, it's applicable to systems worldwide, and I think that will upgrade computers. So I really, right at this point in time, I am not too worried about a way to create an ASIC that solves the DRAM bottleneck. because it's not computationally bound, it's memory bound. And so you have to make memory faster, if that makes sense. So I don't anticipate breaking LXR hash if there's a big improvement in how we access memory. I expect everyone to deploy that into computers, and we'll just make the world a better place.
Do you mean that we could DeFi the world?
Yeah, we'll DeFi the world. Absolutely.
I'm all for DeFi in the world. Cool.
Awesome. Did you have something to add, David?
No, I think this is great. I'm just curious about what else we want to cover. I think we've hit a lot of the big stuff that's happened this week, and there's a lot more to come, I guess. One of the things we talked about are in development for next week and coming. But yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, the only thing, it's not, I guess, PegNet specific update, but it's not being reported on nearly as much as I think it should be, is the stablecoin as an asset, the activity on the blockchain. I just did the math on my phone, my phone froze. If the daily market cap or volume, I'm sorry, on coin market cap right now for Tether is 28.8 trillion or billion dollars. If you do that as a run rate, you're at 346 trillion dollars over the course of a year. I think if I did my math right, but
they're 30 trillion, but it's pretty amazing to see how fast stablecoin stuff has taken off. But that's the rest of the world economy, right? Is all these non-blockchain assets, whether it's dollars or gold or anything else, now being reflected on this tokenized basis. I think over time, right, it's logical that a majority and maybe even a magnitude of order, more volumes can be coming from these real world assets versus just crypto native, right? I mean, it's like the early days of the internet. At first, it was all just internet companies trading with each other, right? Swapping ad revenue and stuff like that. But eventually, Amazon became mainstream, and it was about shipping physical real world goods and using the internet as a means of doing that. I mean, I saw this old interview of Jeff Bezos, and he was actually criticized at the time. Is Amazon really an internet company? Like, you guys are doing pure internet technology. And he was like, I don't care. That's not what matters. What I care about is providing people value. And this is a means of providing them value. I'm just going to keep doing that, right? And he was right. There were some pure internet companies that did really well, the Googles of the world. But even something like Facebook, right? What did they do? They mapped real world relationships, right? I tried all of the social media pre-Facebook, and it was all like, oh, do you have an interest in this topic? Right? And they tried to create these new social graphs. What ended up being much more important to people were the 100 or 200 relationships they already had, right? The people they knew from school, the family members they had, the relatives who were across the country. Those ended up being really, really valuable to map. And Facebook's the first thing I signed up for. That boom, oh, all these people I used to know are here. This is great. I haven't talked to these guys in years. This is like my hidden social graph, and it knows it better than I do, right? So anyway, all that to say, PegNet, I think, can be that vehicle where we map all that real world value onto the blockchain. Like, it's, blockchain has started with all these small little niche assets. Oh, okay, I can spin up my ERC20 for my open source project. And that's amazing. That's unlocked a huge amount of value, but it's dwarfed by the amount of value still held in gold and dollars and euros and Swiss francs and all of these public world's most valuable assets. So it's going to be very interesting to see how much and how fast that sort of catches on, and we can flip the switch from the database it's stored in today to effectively a blockchain representation.
It's also interesting to point out that Congress has taken in the last week some very hard stance and beginning to pass legislation specifically attacking Libra and some of the legislation appears to be attacking algorithmic coins and crypto asset-backed tokens, depending upon how you define some of the regulations. And at this point, so far, PegNet avoids the definitions that they're using to make these attacks on stablecoins. I will say that the U.S. may become very, very hostile to any coin that leverages banking or leverages smart contracts to create stable assets. The first case, they'll attack it as a security being issued by a central party, because a reserve coin has to be a central party. And in the second case, they'll attack it as market manipulation and attack any centralized effort in the middle of a stable coin. So right now, I think we still remain the most compliant approach to building stable assets that's currently available in the market, and that's
largely for us. You're saying largely because there is no custodian, there is no
right. You know, we don't have smart contracts manipulating the market. We don't have leverage, and we don't have all the components that they're attacking right now in proposed legislation. Now, hopefully, all this proposed legislation does not get passed, because I believe this is a move to isolate the U.S. and limit the ability for blockchain companies to live in the U.S. And we're, you know, all the blockchain companies will move to Zug or whatever. We want innovation here in the U.S. At some point, we're going to have to decide whether we're going to protect non-innovative, non-progressive industries like banking and finance. My favorite joke, I'm going to say it here, is that every time a computer comes off the assembly line at Dell, it prays to go to the financial network, financial banking and finance, because that's the only place they get vacations, weekends off, and get to go to sleep at night, you know, before they wake up in the morning. So the crypto world is showing that finance can actually run 24/7, and customers shouldn't be penalized for waking up in the middle of the night and deciding they need to do something. So anyway, a number of thoughts there.
The Crypto Valley is calling, and for those that want to visit me in Zurich, you know, it's I'll see you guys all there soon. Certainly in January, there's a bunch of cool events. So hope a bunch of people in the PegNet community come out in January. There's St. Moritz conference, there's the Davos conference, a lot of cool crypto stuff is not done in the main conference, it's done on the sidelines. And so it's like, if you've ever been to South by Southwest, you don't go to the actual conference, you go to the 10,000 parties around the conference. And so hopefully we'll see everybody out there this year. That was a lot of fun last year.
We'll have to get a meetup going for South by Southwest there this year. It's in March, right? In Austin?
Every March.
Very excited. I have not been yet, but I'd like to go. I'd like to bring publicized blockchain over there. Quick update on my calculation. It's 1.05 trillion is the run rate. Sounds a little bit more reasonable. But the other thing that you were a couple of things. I saw a headline this morning, so I haven't read into the article. Sorry for my dog. That China is now rolling out guidelines for exchanges. So, I mean, if the U.S. doesn't want to get like completely dusted behind, they just don't have a choice, frankly, as I see it. You've got to adapt.
It looks like they also updated their guidance on mining. It is no longer listed as an industry that will be eliminated. And so congratulations to all our friends in China who are planning on continuing mining in China. So, you know, that's good to hear. Anytime freedom increases by a marginal amount, that's always nice.
In my opinion, it's a matter of national security at this point for the U.S. to pass reasonable legislation. I mean, it's getting pretty ridiculous. But tangentially, Kennedy in chat asked, are there any known exchange listings, excuse me, coming up for US customers? Do we know of any?
It's a good question. Certainly welcome US exchanges. You know, there are only a couple at this point, right? You've got Polo exiting the market and Bittrex bifurcated their market. So you really got Kraken, Coinbase, Gemini. There's a new exchange, which I'm happy to note is CoinList. So for those that know AngelList, this is the sister company, CoinList, which has announced that they're going to be launching a US exchange. And they are the primary way that most people have been doing airdrops and STOs and other things within the United States. They've got a broker-dealer license. They're one of the few that is fully regulated for all those activities in the US. And so it makes me a little more optimistic that they'll list things beyond Bitcoin, Ethereum, and a limited number of proprietary stablecoins that they'll be more embracing. So, hey, folks at CoinList, we're your fans. Come on and give PegNet some love. We'll see. But that was one interesting point from this week. I think that was announced Monday, if I'm not mistaken.
That's really interesting. You'll have to share that. I'd love to read about it. What's going on? Same founder as AngelList?
I believe it's Naval. Yeah. Also, same company as Republic that does a lot of the work with different projects in the ecosystem that are working on utility tokens. So, I think they have the right vision. It'll be interesting to see which states they can support. They said in their announcement, I think they can support some US states, maybe not New York, but maybe Texas, maybe Colorado and California. We'll see. So I suspect it'll be the same 30 or 40 states that Kraken serves today, because they exclude New York, but that's okay. We can live without New York. People can move. So it's easier to move from out of New York than it is to Zurich, right? So I'll take all the wins we can get.
New York is going to become the United States to China pretty soon if they don't start adapting themselves.
Well, I think they're planning a firewall of New York where only approved internet access can be.
Soon you have to crawl over the wall to get out of New York.
Yeah. But a lot of the decentralized exchanges don't have walls against US usages. Some of that might be a little dicey in that the US may not like it, but there may not be anyone they can complain to, as no custody exists on these, literally on the decentralized exchange, or depending. Most of the decentralized exchanges have a centralized component, and the US might go after that centralized component. But I don't know. At some point, the pressure by consumers and by the public to have access to the same things that the rest of the world has access to is likely to create a more moderate regulation platform. But we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, that actually makes me think of, and David brought up Jeff Bezos earlier, and kind of the early days and what really broke the internet with them is, I read an article earlier this year about, he said to the journalist, he's like everybody is always asking me, what do I see is going to come down the future and what's next? But nobody's asking him what's not changing. And he says that that's a far more important question. People are always going to want their items from Amazon faster. Like, that's a constant that we can rely on. And I think PegNet kind of addresses that too. What's not going to change? You're going to want to be able to transact 24/7. You're going to want to be able to have some level of reliability for any kind of slippage or whatever, acceptance or off ramps with the stable coins and things like that. So there are a lot of constants that are naturally built into PegNet that I think gives PegNet a real advantage in this kind of ecosystem at large. I don't know if I'm explaining myself well there, but
people are always going to want faster, better, cheaper. So yeah, as much as the Factom and PegNet communities can deliver that, then that's a no-brainer. Cool. All right. Anything else we should cover?
the last thing I'm going to cover is, because I am so hardwired, marketing and community building and development is call to action, man. I mean, if any of this is exciting, it's all community oriented, organic. We would love to continue to grow that. Whether you want to do a meetup, just want to get into the chat and learn some more. If you're interested in talking or doing any kind of interviews or whatever, and you want to get PegNet's word out for us, introductions to media or exchanges you think that we should find interesting, whatever the case is, there's a need for sure. And I'm sure development, I'm missing a big one there. Development is always happy to get some volunteers there.
Yeah, come on, jump on in. See you guys on Discord. Like Katie said, the easiest way to get there is pegnet.org/chat. It'll just direct you there. So cool.
Yep. All good. Well, anyway, hope to see some new faces after this weekly update here, and continue to grow that. And until next week.
See you guys.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you all.